Hello everyone and welcome to this Alps webinar on Connect Interactive and particularly on monitoring Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5. I'm going to take you through Key Stage 5 data this afternoon, but I will mention Key Stage 4 data and everything that I show you is as equally reproducible in Key Stage 4. So what are we going to look at? We're going to look at Connect Interactive as an in-year tracking tool. So we're going to look at quite a lot of different features that you can use for your monitoring data. Particularly, we're going to look at some gaps between different groups of students. I'm going to focus on gender, but there are other groups of students that you can identify in Connect Interactive, and indeed the custom column feature, which is brand new, is going to allow you to put any data that you want in feeder schools or any kind of data that you want for tracking. In particular, during this webinar, I am going to focus on monitoring accuracy tool. It's been in Connect Interactive for about a month now, and hopefully you found it useful if you have had a look at what it can do. I am going to use it this afternoon in a couple of different ways, just to give you a feel for the different types of analysis that it can throw up and the different questions that you can start to ask as a result of what you see on the screen. In effect, then, we're going to look at Connect Interactive, looking at how you can get the most out of your monitoring data quickly and smartly, and hopefully get some student intervention groups sorted out and in place so that the progress of the young people that you're teaching can be maximized. So what's the point of of monitoring then? So what we're looking for is obviously to identify those students who are doing really well, who are making excellent progress against their targets, and to give them praise and keep them going and make them feel good about where they've been and where they're going. Importantly, though, as well, we're looking at who might be making less progress than expected towards their targets, and particularly, are they having a significant effect on overall subject indicators and on teaching set indicators, etc. I'm going to focus really on the subject this afternoon in this webinar and not on the strategic. So we're going to look mostly at subject and how you make maximum progress with the students that you're actually physically teaching sitting in front of you. So as I said, we're going to look at some progress gaps and how you look at where you need to put different intervention in place, and then the monitoring accuracy tool. Now, the key thing about the monitoring accuracy is that I'm going to show you some trends, and if we're not looking back at what's happened before in different subject areas, then we could potentially get sort of the wrong picture for how a set of predicting data looks. I'm going to give you explicit examples of what I mean by that, but unless you've got accurate predictions and unless you trust those predictions, then you could be intervening with the wrong groups of students, as I'm sure you know. So we'll look at some of those issues arising, shall I say, over the course of the webinar. The great thing about Connect then is that you've got hopefully all of your teaching staff with access. So the minute that it goes in, and remember this is instantaneous, they can start getting to grips with their what if tools, the how do I'll talk about these in a second, and the how do I's and the what ifs to get the most out of where you might go next and where your teaching or where your subject intervention might focus. And that's sort of the key thing, that at each monitoring point, you're looking at reviewing where the students have got to so far, and then obviously what you can do going forward. Now we're going to go into Connect Interactive. Before I do, let me just talk you through what data I'm going to be looking at with you this afternoon. So I've got some A-level data, but as I say, equally as important to do at Key Stage 4, and exactly the same principles. So we've got today current year 13. Now I'm kind of projecting forward a little bit. So these are our year 13s that are going to finish in 2019. And what I've got for us to look at is I have got some data from their end of year 12. So the data that I'm going to show you is some raw mock data. Now that could be, if it was year 12, that could be internal examinations that you might have sat with them at the end of year 12. And that would be the absolute raw scores from those. Similarly, if this is year 11 that you're looking to do this with, then you will have probably done some end of year 10 assessments with those students. If you're in Wales or Northern Ireland, then you will likely have an entire set of AS grades, which you know, you might want to, well, I would recommend you put into Connect as a monitoring point. That's actually called an MPZ, which I'll come to in just a tick. Okay, so I've got some raw mock data from year 12. So I'm making an assumption this is in England and we've got no ASs, so it's kind of internal assessment. And then I've got predicted grades on top of that. So those are the predicted outcomes that my teachers have assessed from the more sort of holistic year of teaching with those students. And actually, sometimes the discrepancy between these two is quite revealing, and can you can ask some sort of pertinent questions about that's a big gap. How are you going to make up that difference? Let's talk about that in a moment when we get there. Moving through then, I've got 5 monitoring points for this year group, and I'm sort of pretending, sorry to wish your lives away, but I'm pretending that it's sort of June next year, and we've got all of those different monitoring data points for this year group so that we can look at trends. Okay, the last one of which I have added fine grades to, because I want to show you the fine grades tool and how you might use some modeling in that mode as well when we get in there. Right then, I am going to switch my screen to Alps Connect. Now, before we pop into this bit, which is the Connect Interactive part, I'm just going to scroll down and show you these 3 blue boxes, particularly those 2. The downloads has got the Alps guides in. Now, those were the bits of the pages from the old reports that told you all about the sort of benchmarks and how the benchmarks were constructed and where the minimum expected grades came from, etc., etc. So that's all in there now. And we stripped that all out of the PDF so that everyone can actually see that that information for themselves, that Alps guide, whether or not you've got access to the report. Now, a really important area is this knowledge base. Let me click on it. It takes you through to our knowledge base, which is on this web browser here. Basically in here we've added and we're continuing to add loads of what we hope is really helpful information and shorter videos that demonstrate a couple of things. One is how you get your data in the first place. So that's for data managers and those responsible for that. We've got using your analysis. Now that's really a lot of information on interpretation of thermometers, interpretation of strategic indicators and subject indicators, and articles on those, but also functionality bits and bobs as well. So how do you use the what if tool? And so really short videos on that. The big thing that's in there are the staff checklists, and the staff checklists I'm going to come back to at the very end of this webinar, but those are 4 different types of staff checklists that really hopefully allow you to use with different staff across your school or college, so that you're all kind of talking the same language and asking the same sorts of questions and doing the same sorts of analysis in Connect. I'm going to come back to those later on. Okay, that's the knowledge base. Right then, let's head into Connect Interactive. Now, as I said, I'm really focusing on subjects this afternoon and not so much on the strategic. And so we're going to focus in on subjects, on monitoring accuracy there, and we might pop into the students. Let's see how much time we've got. Starting the subjects then. Okay, now the first thing to just say is this little blue lozenge here, if I click on it, it allows me to select which grade points I want to see across the top. So I can either do exam results, or I can do monitoring grades, or I can customize it, and there's a little drop down and I can clear it and add as appropriate. I'm going to start on year 13 on my third monitoring point. So I'm going to pretend that it's Easter time, that it's March of next year, and that I've got my 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's September, November, January, March. Those are the 4 monitoring points that I'm going to look at right now. Okay, so these are the 4. These are my A-level subjects, and this is the trend line then. So what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at, let's take a couple of subjects. Let's take biology. So the biology department on the surface of this trend look like they're doing pretty nicely, thanks very much. So grade 3, grade 2, and then just dropped slightly to grade 4. So you'd look at that trend and you'd probably think, great, good, biology department are doing quite nicely. Now I'm going to find some additional information for you in a second, which is going to possibly throw you a little bit on that trend. So I guess what I'm sort of saying to you here is you can get an enormous amount of information from this screen, but you can't get everything. So the monitoring accuracy area is much more important than, first of all, we might think that it is. Can we check out history just as another alternative here to the biology? Now, the history department, they start off the year on a grade 7, which is worrying. You know, you're going to start on maths, so that you're going to start getting a little bit nervous about that and say, okay, what are you doing, history department? You know, how are you going to improve? Then they bump to 7, 5, 3. So by the time you hit March, the history department are looking a lot stronger. Now, 2 things spring to mind there. One is that a trend that's been apparent in the past? So can I trust my history department that that is an accurate predicting grade, a prediction, those are accurate prediction grades for March? Has that been a trend in previous years? Or, and therefore their interventions have actually, you know, yielded fruit kind of thing? Or are they over predicting? Is there a trend in the past of them actually just telling me what I want to know, or being more positive, more sort of growth mindset with the students than perhaps is accurate? So there's a couple of things there for you to consider, and the monitoring accuracy area might answer some of those questions for us. So that's my trend. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop into one of the subjects. Let's pop into history and look at what your teachers be doing each set of monitoring grades goes in. Okay, so now whilst that's loading up, I'm going to get some class information. Right, so I've got 2 history sets and they're both red. And this is showing me, this pie chart here is showing me the class for the monitoring point that I have in that blue bar there. Okay, so that is in March, they're both red. I've got a table, so this is starting now to show the group difference, the gaps difference. So you can see in history that actually there's female and there's male. Now 0.2 is equivalent to a grade per student, 0.2. So the fact that there's only 0.04 between those 2 groups of students means that actually there's very little gap. Okay, so I'm probably going to be quite satisfied that within history, students in the female and male students are making the same amount of progress. Similarly with disadvantage, and there's very little gap there between those. Now, if I had any custom filters at this point, so any groupings that were particular to your school or college, I could now apply them. And I'm just going to apply a gender one so that you can compare, edit, gender, and apply that. So I can apply them on this thermometer, and then I can see any group that I've actually asked for set out in a visual way there. Okay. Now scrolling down, here's my teachers and here are my classes for history. I'm going to go into a class in a minute and we're going to look at the class analysis, but you can see there that you don't have to put teachers in. You can obviously just put teaching sets in, and of course some teachers share sets, share groups, so you might not want to put the teacher in. You might also have had a change of teacher across the year, so again you might not want to put those teachers in. Up to you. Let's go into a teaching set. Let's go into this one. So when you pop into a teaching set, you get the same sort of analysis by your different monitoring points and your groups of students. And you can actually see here that there is a slight 0.1. So it's about half a grade between the girls' progress in this set and the boys' progress in this set. So if I was the teacher of this set, then I would be sort of thinking, right, my girls are not making as strong progress as my boys. So what might I do to support the girls in raising their progress? Now I can see that's the overview. So I can see my students here. So these are all my students in my history group. Okay. Prior achievement here. I'm going to just pop the prior achievement filter on highest to lowest. This is key stage 4 prior attainment. And I can see immediately that my minimum expected grade for these high prior attainers is an A grade, and there's a couple there that are lower. One's actually male, one's female. But I'm starting to kind of be able to identify individual students who are potentially not making the progress that we might want them to make. And conversely, actually, these students at the lower prior attainment end, which are making excellent progress. So this is the screen from which you might want to do some what ifs. So I'm going to pop the what if on. Let me just reset this, sorry, so that it's a little bit easier for you to see. Take the gender gap off the thermometer. Pop that what if on again. Now then, two things I can do here. I can do an overall what if. So if I'm a grade 3, for example, I might want to know how I managed to move my group up to a grade 2. So I can click on that 3 there and I can drag it. See, drag, and I just drop it anywhere I want to, and it will tell me on average how many students I need to change the grade of to move to the next level. If you're worried, I'm being pessimistic here, but if you're worried, you think, well, how many do I need to drop by to start moving down the thermometer? So that's your sort of cushion, if you like, for if you want to worst case scenario. So what I can start to do now is, okay, 3 grades to move up to grade 2. So I can say, okay, this student here then, if I were to target that student to B grade, what effect would that have on my thermometer? And I can do that. If I do that, I'm just guessing now. So there's my 3rd grade, and look, this part of the thermometer has gone up to a grade 2. So I can then start to look at identifying intervention groups to, make sure that my overall subject thermometers are looking nice and healthy. I'm aware that I'm talking very generically about subject grades here, when obviously it's the student themselves that you want to focus on for their futures and their best outcomes. Okay, so that's my subject area. Now, let me just take off that what if now. I'm going to jump, sorry about this, but I'm going to jump into MP4, which remember I said was my fine grade viewpoint. Now, if you don't use fine grades, then kind of bear with me for this short little period, because I have fine graded my A-level predictions into 1, 2, and 3, where 1 is I could stretch those. They might potentially with a little bit of more support, get to the next grade up. And my 3s are that person is at risk of dropping down to the next grade below. Now you will note that I have got a fine grade tab. So if I go to the fine grade tab, I've then got some sliders, and I can basically move these sliders around to do some modeling. So at the moment, it's assuming that 100% of my secures, that's my middle grade, fine grade 2, are going to get that fine grade, and that 0 are going to move up from a 1, and 0 are going to drop from a 3. So if I just start moving those, 46%, if I can stretch 46% of them up, what does that do to my grade? I can do one at a time. Okay, so that if I put that down to 0, I can model one at a time. So if 60% of my at-risks drop, then look at where that puts me on my thermometer. Or, she says, as a non-scientist, as a scientist, sorry, I could do a cumulative one. So I could say, well, last year, you know what, I managed to put 20% up, but I dropped 30% of them down. But then I also managed to convert a few secure, so middle grades, up to the next level, but a few of them dropped. So I'm just kind of making this up, but you can see that it's quite a powerful little slider modeling tool that you can play around with fine grades and find out what the impact might be on your overall. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. So I can do all of that manipulation at the subject level, or as I've shown you, at the teaching set level. Okay, now let's go back to our subject page here. Nifty little tool. Just let me show you one little thing here before we move into monitoring accuracy. Let me pretend now if I'm a senior leader and I'm looking at this overall subject page, and I just want to see what it looks like. Oh, sorry. I just want to see what it looks like compare my gender, okay? Just overall, every subject. Now, initially, it brings it out like this, where there's all my girls and there's all my boys. But you might not have noticed in this top corner here, there's a little tick box that says show all students. If I tick that for that grade set there, I then get them all in one table, okay? So I can now immediately see that in business studies, my boys are actually underperforming by about half a grade on the girls. And you know, similarly in biology, other way around. So I can start to look at sort of big subject trends with a comparison filter on, and make some sort of key observations, and then ask some key questions, or go out and do some sort of key intervention from that. I just wanted to show you that because it's a little bit hidden, that little tick box there. Right, let's talk monitoring accuracy. So let's pop in here. Now, I've got no grade points at the minute, so bear with me. Historical trends or in-year trends. Now, the historical trends is going to show you the difference between any 2 grade points, okay? And the in-year trends, you can have more of a trend. So I'm showing you now, I've flicked into MP4, so it's basically November, January, March, June, okay? I am seeing here what I saw in the subject area, but I can do a little bit more with it here. All right, so what I've got is I've got each grade point is showing me an up or down arrow as compared to the one immediately before it. So I can see that if I've got fine art, for example, that I was on a grade 5, 1.02, slightly up, slightly down, up, up. Okay, so I've got a bit of a trend line. Now I can also hover over that graph, and I can just see that visually on that graph, which is pretty neat, I think, to be able to see that. So what you're really looking for is that. So you're looking for a graph like the drama department have got, which is a nice straight line, because if they're predicting accuracy is spot on, then actually there shouldn't be an awful lot of movement, unless, of course, going back to history, they are having massive impact with their interventions, and that is actually a realistic increased line. Biology, on the other hand, is a little bit all over the place, and government and politics, you can see. So it's quite a nice little tool to show that trend line. If I then pop into biology, okay, then there's that trend line there. And you can see that my sets have now come up. Let's ignore the teachers, but the sets have now come up. So what I can do is I can click on that set, and it will show me the trend line of that set compared to the overall subject. So you've got this teacher here, or the teachers of this set here, are basically under predicting or have much lower predictions than the overall subject, which probably is going to mean that this set is above it. Okay, so this is the amalgamation of those two sets. So is that realistic? Is that accurate? Is this set really doing an awful lot worse? Is it a lower ability set? But this is progress, remember. So you've got to then say, right, okay, even if it is a lower ability set, they are still not making the progress. So you're going to have to be worried a little bit about this set here, and maybe, is that a realistic trend line? That was a grade 1 prediction. Is that accurate? So that then kind of brings me to this historical. So far what we've done is we've just looked at in-year trends. Now, biology has got a little bit of a confusing picture. So let me go into historical trends. Now I'm going to select a couple of grade points for us to look at. I would like to look at that March grade point, but I would like to look at it against last year's outcomes. Now I know that this is a different I'm just clearing those, getting rid of those. So I've got last summer and right now, March, current year 13. Now I know this is a different cohort, but it gives you a flavour for where that subject has been in the past and where you're predicting might have some concerns. Look at biology. So last year they got a grade 6 and now they're on a grade 3. So potentially you need to be a little bit worried about the predicting accuracy of that department because they seem to be over predicting. I know it's a different cohort, but that's the kind of feel. Economics, look, a 7 to a 2. So you can ask in that question of, really? Is that really realistic? Is this cohort so much better in terms of their progress than last year's? So I think there's a really powerful table for you to just get a feel for where a subject's been and where it's going. Incidentally, in this in-year trend, you can custom select your grade point. So if I just put MP 1, 2, and 3, bear with me, on here, and then put that 2017-18 on that one, then again, I can very much see that's their start, that's last year's start point, and I can then start to see trend lines. If I go into biology now with that 2017-18 showing, it shows me last year's grade, and you can just see how much higher they are predicting than they got last year. It's just there, I think, just for you to be aware of and ask questions, whether you're a senior leader, whether you're a subject leader. I think it's important that you have a look. Right, let's go back to this in-year trend, sorry, this historical trend, because I want to just show you one last thing. In the custom area of that then, I'm going to go back to last summer, my year 12. So remember I said to you that they'd done a raw mock and a predicted mock. So there's prediction, and there's my, there's my raw mock grade. Let me just clear those. So accept that. So what I've got is that's their exam from last summer, year 12, and that's the prediction that my teachers gave on top of that. So what I can do is sort by the biggest difference. I'm really picking on biology. It's okay, I'm a biology teacher, I'm allowed to. So look at biology here. You've got a grade 8 that they come out with at the end of that exam series there, and they suddenly predicted a grade 3 from that exam data. So I think you're within your rights to ask the question of, really, how are you going to make up that difference between a grade 8 and a grade 3, and importantly, 0.69 to 0.95. So what's that? Almost 0.3. So that's a grade and a half. Is that really realistic? Are they going to be performing that much better than that set of exam results suggested? Okay, so hopefully that is a great overview of Connect Interactive for you to be able to start doing some really in-depth analysis of your monitoring and asking the key questions of different staff. I talked to you before about these checklists. They're on the knowledge base. This is an example of the monitoring point 1. There are 4 devised for those 4 different roles in the school. They all talk to each other, so they're all kind of along the same lines. They have the same, in the monitoring points, for example, they have the same, have you reviewed the fine grade impact, asking a question that's either tailored to a senior leader, a subject leader, or a subject teacher, etc. They're just pop into the knowledge base, check staff checklists, and all 4 of them will come up. They're PDFs, print them off. Please use them. Hopefully you find them useful. They've got little videos that go with them if you need to remind yourself of how to get to that tool. Okay, so hopefully those are useful. They sit alongside this, which is our new Alps cycle poster for your walls, nice and colourful. And that is an overview. It's just a kind of an overview trend of where your year might pan out, how your year might pan out, and what you might do in Connect Interactive at any given point in the year, with sort of links to webinars, and the checklists are noted up there. Finally, from me then, don't forget the knowledge base. Don't forget the fact that on the Training Hub, that's the website, Training Hub, we have got lots of these webinars recorded and live for you to listen to and hopefully get some good information from. We've got training courses that you can book us for, conferences coming up. We've got a few in November in Leeds, London, and in Cardiff, and one in North Wales in December. So please do come along to that. They're £95 plus VAT, and we're going to be looking at this in a lot more detail. And also you can give us a call. So support team are on a queue from sort of 9 till 5 weekdays, and they're really helpful people and can take you through any aspect that you feel that you need to talk about. That's it for me. Hopefully that was enjoyable and informative. And until next time, thanks very much for listening. Bye then.